failure is an option, and we encourage you to do it as quickly as possible because you learn from it.
Welcome to the Lighter Darker podcast, where we talk about the creative process of filmmaking and the art of visual storytelling. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our 6th episode, 6 of 20, that we have planned for season 1, and we release every other Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us today. Todd Vaziri is out on vacation, and today we have 2 special guests to help me co-host the podcast. So let me give you a brief introduction to guest number 1, Shannon Tindle. He doesn't really need an introduction. I'm sure you all know Shannon.
I think I do.
I barely. He was a character designer on Samurai Jack, Megamind. Of course, has a story by credit and designed characters and did many other things. His fingerprints are everywhere on Kubo and the 2 Strings. And then most recently, he show ran the beautiful Lost Ollie, which you can see on Netflix if you haven't already seen it. I recommend it highly. And then just this year, Ultraman Rising, the feature film, he wrote and directed, worked on that for a couple of years, Shannon?
A couple of years.
Shannon, thank you for coming to the podcast.
So happy to be here. You'll know how much of a fan I am of Industrial Light and Magic. So I'm very happy to be here.
It's so lovely to have you calling out artists by name online, to supporting the craftspeople behind the work that you're doing, Shannon. It's one of the things we want to celebrate.
Well, speaking of, it sucks that Todd's not on this call because we followed each other for a long time on social media, but we've never met or chatted. So we'll have to remedy that.
We will have to do a reprise of Shannon Tindle on the podcast when Todd's not on vacation. That'd be great.
Yes.
Joining Shannon is Hayden Jones, Industrial Light and Magic visual effects supervisor. He's won BAFTAs and Emmys for shows like The Black Mirror and The Mandalorian. He's got credits dating back to Lost in Space and Mission Impossible 2, so he's been doing this for a couple years.
You're making me feel really old.
Lost in Space, I remember watching that in the theater, so I think I might have a couple years on you. Hayden also served as the overall visual effects supervisor for ILM and the production, working for Shannon and the team on both Lost Ollie and Ultraman Rising.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It's great to have you here, too. And as always, our producer, Jenny Ely, is joined us as well.
Hello, good to be here.
As always, I'm Rob Brado. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at ILM and SVP of Creative Innovation at Lucasfilm. And we're excited to dive right into today's shows. We've got it organized into 3 sections. We're going to start with a couple of features. We're going to dive into first, Rejection Letters. And then we're going to talk about Deleted Dreams. And then our main topic for the day is really empathy in animation. And there's no better person, I think, to talk to about empathy in animation than Shannon, who is really, I think, continue to elevate what can be done in the art form in that way and these kind of heartfelt stories that I just love. So we'll be excited to dive into that as our main topic. But before we get to the fun stuff about empathy, let's talk about Rejection Letters. And this idea for this section, Shannon, is, people always say you learn more from your mistakes than your successes. But of course, when you get on a podcast, we always just talk about our success stories. But people are listening to this show who have not had the kind of success that somebody like Shannon Tindle has had. So what are those moments before the moment, when a door closed? What did you do? And how did you kind of overcome some of that adversity? And, what were those moments like in your life? Did you have something in mind?
Yeah, where I grew up in Kentucky, there aren't a whole lot of people who do what I do. And so it's this thing that you see from afar. I grew up reading Cinefex and Cinefantastique and watching behind the scenes specials on making films and never really thinking that I could do it. And I always drew too. So we were going through Disney World one year, and they had what they called the fishbowl at the time, and you could see the animators working. And I would just stay there for hours. I would sneak, because they would usher the tour open, and I would kind of hide in the background and then wait so that I could just keep staring at Bruce Johnson was actually the animator, whom I've never met. And I would just watch and just dream of doing this. And my dad, I was actually a biology major at the University of Louisville, and I was doing well, but he was like, you don't seem to be into this. You seem to want to do something else. And I said, well, I'd like to get into film. I'd like to get into animation. I said, well, let's figure it out. So I told him about CalArts. And at the last minute, just before submitting portfolios, I'd never put a portfolio together. I'd always drawn, and I'd taken some art classes in high school, but that was my only formal education. So I submitted my portfolio to CalArts with a month to put a portfolio together, and I got rejected.
And just to double check, you were already in college?
Yeah, I was considering a career in medicine and being a doctor. Both my parents are nurses, and thought about going to medical school because I've always loved biology and anatomy and those kinds of things. But Dad could read me and said, "Let's pursue this." So I submitted my portfolio, and I didn't get in. And my dad, being my dad, maybe this is where I get some of my tenacity from. Certainly from my mom as well. But he called the school and he said, does he have a chance or should he just pack it up? And they said, actually, he got really close.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of the encouragement that I needed. And then I spent the whole next year putting a portfolio together. And I worked full time too, because I knew CalArts was expensive.
Yeah.
And I hoped to get some scholarships. And then I was just saving every penny I had,
Were you going to school at this time too, Shannon? Or was it just all, you burned the bridges?
Yeah, I burned the bridges. So I was working full time at a printing company and working second shift, which allowed me to go to the zoo and do drawings and work on the portfolio during the day. And that was 7 days a week. I was doing that, getting it ready. And what actually was helpful too is we flew out to visit CalArts. Dad's, if you're going to go for this, let's fly out. And I met the teachers, and I'll never forget, I met Corny Cole, who was a legend in animation. He worked with Chuck Jones, one of the few artists that got screen credit on later Chuck Jones cartoons for layout, along with Maurice Noble, and just a lovely, quirky individual. And he kind of took me under his wing, and he would send me photocopies of artists I should study, and he would look at drawings. So I put that portfolio together, and then, okay, here comes the time again. I've just spent another year. Will I get in or will I won't, after having been rejected once? And right when the results are going to come in, my little town of Shepherdsville, Kentucky, as prominently featured in Lost Ollie, floods, and we weren't getting any mail. And I'll never forget, I was working at the printing company, and my dad had called CalArts and said, look, here's a situation. We're not getting mail. The town's underwater. Can you let us know? And my dad called me, and I'll never forget, he was crying on the phone. He said, you got in.
What amazing.
And that was one of many trials and rejections. There have been many over the years. And, some people say you need to have something to fight. I certainly don't have a problem, as Hayden can tell you, Rob. Not fighting with Hayden, but fighting for something that I believe in and what I want to do. And to have parents who are so encouraging is the reason that I think I stuck it out and why I've continued to be stubborn about this business.
What an amazing story. I have a CalArts rejection story too. I brought my portfolio, but it was all computer graphics art. And at the time they had computer graphics. This was early 90s. And computer graphics was in the experimental animation section. And they didn't really have, at least the people we talked to at CalArts at the time, didn't really have a way of evaluating a portfolio of someone who wasn't able to do the life drawing at the level that people like you were able to do at the time. So they basically said, you can apply, but it's very unlikely you're going to make it here at CalArts because there's a certain level of minimum competency you're going to need to have with a pencil to be able to do this. So I actually didn't go to CalArts. I went to another university and majored in radio, TV, film, which was an interesting process, but such an amazing story for you to have persevered through that first round.
What it allowed me to do, too, was kind of a blessing in disguise. I was able to save more money. And then I actually got some scholarships as well. So, and I have to give Frank Terry a shout out to. Frank was the head of the department at the time, and he's no longer with us, but he was just an incredibly kind man. And, I didn't have a whole lot of money in second year when it came around to stick around at CalArts. And I went to him, I said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to come back. And he made sure that I got the help I needed to be able to stay. So, yeah, we all have those people, too, that I always want to call out is, there's me trying to do my thing, but my career wouldn't be possible without the people who've helped me along the way. So,
yeah, that's fantastic. Well, that's an amazing story, and there's that legacy, that era, actually many eras of CalArts, but that era of CalArts, the people who came out of those classes in that time have all gone on to such success. Certainly some of your classmates. Were the years that you were at CalArts also overlapping with a lot of other people that you're still interacting with today?
Yes, I actually, my closest friends who I still, not only do I hang out with, but we work together. I just showed Ultraman at Pixar, and my good buddy Pete Zone, who was at CalArts at the time, director of The Good Dinosaur and Elemental, he's doing all right.
He's such a delightful person.
And then guys like Pete Browngardt, who's over at Warner Brothers doing all the Looney Tunes stuff over there, just exceptional work from Pete. And then Shane Prigmore, who's an exec at Disney and Skydance, but he's now back at Warner Brothers directing a new film that I don't think I can talk about. But yeah, I'm still very close with those folks. Andy Schuler, Anna Chambers, who married Pete, and is an incredible artist as well. So yeah, we had a lot of good folks here. And I think around the time that you were trying to get in, Rob, that would have been like the Gendy, Craig McCracken era.
That's right.
So Stu Maschwitz, I think, was there as well. They were doing those crazy films. If you've seen the killer films, you got to watch them.
I ended up not getting to go to Cal Arts, but when my first job in the industry was a little company called Vision Art Design and Animation. And I was working next to a guy, Wayne Vincenzi, and another guy, Ed, whose last name is escaping me right now. They both had just graduated from Cal Arts and knew all of those people who were just graduating. So I got to sit next to them and build up my artistic skills, learning from these people who had just had all this amazing experience. So you're getting to balance the artistic and the technical side was such a joy to get to do on the job when I didn't have the opportunity to do that at the school.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that setback story, but also the optimism behind that, Shannon. It's so much fun. We're going to move on to a second feature called Deleted Dreams. And the fun about this is you're talking about a shot or a sequence or a minute that had to be omitted from a film to serve the greater needs of the film. But, you can still love it. You can still celebrate the beauty that went into that. And I don't know, Hayden, if you had anything in mind that you wanted to share, because all of us have these stories of omits.
I think one of the things that really resonated is actually on Ultraman. And there was a point during production where it felt like there needed to be almost like a title sequence to do a kind of, a bit of backstory on some of the characters. And I remember Shannon going, well, this is the kind of story we want to tell, and these are all the beats. And we'd just been sharing The Human Target, which is a great graphic novel by Greg Smallwood, the illustrator. Yeah. Amazing, absolutely
written by Tom King, I think.
Tom King, yeah, amazing. I mean, really beautiful kind of graphic novel. And I was, wow, maybe we could kind of use a little bit of the themes of the illustration from that, but kind of give it an anime manga kind of twist. And I think you pitched it to us on a Friday, and I spent the whole weekend just like imagining what this whole sequence was going to be like. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a pitch deck, and we're gonna really wow Shannon when he comes back on Monday with what we've got. And I remember getting on the call, and Shannon was like, I think everyone wants to go in a different direction now. And I was like, but I've got this beautiful pitch deck, and it's great, and I can almost see it in my head, and I really want to make this. And it was like, yeah, no, I think it's all going to go in a different direction. And we were like, oh, well, next time we'll kind of like have it.
Well, we tried it. I wrote it.
Yeah.
And we tried it, and every time we boarded it, it just felt like it added time without actually adding too much information. And it's one of the things that I think you see in a lot of animated films, especially because you're world building, and a lot of the instinct is, well, let's tell everybody, let's set up the whole world. I kind of go the other way and say, no, let's throw them into the middle of the world, as you would if you dropped into the middle of a TV show. When I was a kid and I found Ultraman, I didn't start from the first episode. I started from the middle.
And it's so right to do it as well, because it, as the film is now, it's great because it has this pace at the start where it doesn't need to slow down for a title sequence. You don't need that kind of exposition. And it was so the right choice.
One of the things I've said too is it's a Ken Sato story. It's a family story. It's not it's not really about Ultraman. He happens to be Ultraman. So that's about the family. But yeah, they were like, I was excited too. I remember when you were pitching that stuff. And what's interesting, since Greg Smallwood has posted his inspiration as being 101 Dalmatians, so drawing from animation, feeding back into it. But yeah, there were things. I tend to be more of the things I wish we'd kept. There are things like, man, this would have been great if we could have kept it. Like the epilogue that we had for Ollie.
Oh, the epilogue for Ollie would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking and like inspirational at the same time. There's so many moments as well, and I think it's really difficult whenever you're working on a project, because you see that project with a completely different view to how the viewer sees it, because you see all of these kind of turns and places that the script once went and now it doesn't anymore. And so I think when you're working on a show, you have this almost like constant director's cut of everything and everything you've ever seen, because there's so many moments that you wish you could kind of resurrect on a show.
How do you keep it fresh, Shannon and Hayden, when you're working on one of these shows? Because you get so embedded into it, you get so used to it, it's hard to have those fresh eyes. What are the kind of things that give you that perspective of the first-time viewer?
It's always changing. It's never the same. That's one of the reasons I get boring, is it's never the same. You're constantly evolving. I would say the core of what we did with Ultraman is there, and much of the details of it remained as well, but it's constantly moving, and sometimes for the better, sometimes you're learning a lesson, sometimes you're trying things and you're moving. Mm-hmm. You don't really have time to get bored. And Hayden knows this too. Like, I'm usually working on about 3 or 4 other things as well that kind of keep my brain fresh so that I can come to it every day. And the way that you get fresh eyes is everybody on your crew, they're not seeing the whole thing. They're kind of focused on one section of it. So when they see the whole thing, you get plenty of opinions and plenty of honesty about what should be fixed and what should be changed. And then you have to figure that out. Same thing with the studio. And then there are the little Christmas packages that keep me going every day. When we would get a sync sketch link from you guys, and I knew I was going to be seeing new stuff, I get giddy, because it's been in my head for so long, and now it's been passed along to exceptional artists, and there's their version of it, and it happens internally in the art department, with the story team, really with everybody. And then when you actually see you're doing rough layout, or you're doing lighting and comp and animation, all those steps add to the excitement of it to keep it fresh.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think as well, that goes through supervision too, because you never want to be completely prescriptive about it. You want to allow the artist to have this flexibility and a conversation about what the shots could be. And it's those times where you see it in dailies and go, I never realized that it was going to go together in this way. It's better than I imagined. Let's get it in front of Shannon. That's where the excitement comes day after day. You're always on this kind of like tsunami of excitement where if you can inspire the rest of the team then returns the pleasure and inspires you back.
Love that. Well, that's kind of a perfect segue to transition to talking about our main topic, which is empathy and animation. And I think it's such a perfect thing to talk about with this group, because whether you're thinking about Lost Ollie or Kubo or Ultraman, these are such empathetic characters and stories, and there's so much emotion on the screen. And I guess I'm curious first, Shannon, what draws you to these kind of stories that have this much heart? How have you worked that in to be such a theme of your work?
It's the kind of stories that I'm attracted to in other media, whether it's books or games or TV shows, films. I'm a huge Dickens fan, and there's a lot of empathy in his work. If you read Great Expectations or Oliver Twist, Christmas Carol, even Christmas Carol's empathy toward the villain.
Yes.
The villain is the star of the story, right? I often say when I get the note, I don't know if the character's likable enough. I'm like, imagine if you'd said that when you got a first draft of A Christmas Carol. We'd never have that story. He's despicable, but that redemption story is such an incredible thing to read.
Yes.
And the other thing too is I don't mind if you hate my thing, whatever I've made. The worst thing is for you to be indifferent about it. Be like, whatever. It's forgettable. That's the worst. And I think empathy is one of those ways where no matter what the subject matter is, whether it's, in the case of Ultraman, it's about this 150-foot tall superhero, or Lost Ollie, it's about a little handmade toy. You can call it, whether you're into characters like Ultraman or not, or whether you're into things that you might normally think would be just standard kind of kiddie fare. I think there's an opportunity there to reach a broad audience by speaking to things that everybody can relate to, no matter where you are, no matter where you came from. We've all dealt with the loss of a loved one. We've all dealt with feeling inadequate in a moment, or not feeling that we're living up to the legacy that's been established before us by our family. We all feel those things. And I think it's the most memorable stories, the most timeless stories. And I think it's what is so remarkable about Spielberg's catalog, or somebody like Frank Capra. Frank Capra got criticized. They called it Capricorn because they would say he leans so much into it. But people are still talking about Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. People are still talking about It's a Wonderful Life. And I think what a lot of people forget about a film like It's a Wonderful Life is it's hard. It's, that character, George Bailey, goes through a lot. He loses things often. He loses his dad early in the film. And to put somebody in that position is something that allows them to connect with your work, but also being able to put your own experiences into your work. It's things like Kubo, for example, his mother losing his memories. It's an experience that I had with my mother-in-law. It's an experience that I had with my family. I've lost several family members to Huntington's disease, which is a horrible disease. And I think it's why it recurs in my work, this idea that you have all this history that you've built over years of a life, and that it could all be forgotten. And what a precious treasure to lose. But also, I think it's a mistake to avoid talking about those things. The more you talk about it, the more empathy you can inspire people, and you can make it, I wouldn't say easier, but make it more a part of life. These things happen, and there's loss, and we can mourn someone, and we can also celebrate them. The other thing I think is empathetic filmmaking does is allows us to see other people's experiences, and maybe experiences that we haven't gone through, but I can still connect with the character and understand them through the moments I'm seeing on screen. That's why it's endlessly engaging for me. I'm fine laughing for 90 minutes, but if I don't feel anything after it, it's like junk food. It's fine. You feel like you enjoy it while you're eating it, then you kind of just feel empty afterward. And I'd rather, give you more of a home-cooked meal.
As you were describing those scenes that make you feel that way, I mean, my mind flashes to the campfire scene out in the wilderness, and you describing the importance of memory and the personal value in that, and then for his father to be showing the kind of interest that he never knew he was going to, and then committing those to like physical items on the wall, it makes that sort of demonstration even more meaningful. I
think it's why, too, not to give an excuse for my peccadillos, but it's probably why I'm a bit of a hoarder, too. I don't like to get rid of anything because, you go through those things and you're cycling through them and you start to see, oh my gosh, here's an old picture. Oh, here's a drawing I did. Those are things that I show to my daughter. I'll say, okay, you see how I draw now. Look how I drew just 10 years ago. Not great. It's a work in progress. So it's one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was Regina Dugan, who was my boss at the ATAP team at Google when I was doing a Spotlight story. And she said, failure is an option, and we encourage you to do it as quickly as possible because you learn from it. And to have that freedom, to have somebody over you who's as smart as Regina, but Regina is also a very empathetic person, to say it's okay to fail. We have whole projects here that we try that don't work, but we learn something huge from them by trying it. And it's the same thing. When you make things, I wish more companies would do this, would take the fear out of the thing that you're doing. I think that they would probably get much better results, and you'd get bolder ideas and more long-lasting things, and investing in all these original things that we've been strip mining for years now. Let's make way for some new ideas, because those bold ideas is why you're able to benefit off of it years later. But there's such a fear around it. There's a fear of failure. But just say it's okay to fail. It's not catastrophic. We learn something from that. Maybe we need to learn how to do it better, or learn how to do it differently, or learn that maybe we shouldn't do that. But at least give it a shot. Try it.
Well, that's the kind of culture that I think Hayden and the team experienced on your two projects that we've just recently done together, where all the feedback from the artists on that show, from the production teams, from the support staff, it was universal that everyone was on the same team, pulling together, trying stuff. And of course, there's always setbacks in something as complicated as a film or a series like this. But every time it was like, okay, where do we go from here in a very constructive way where you get amazing people are so motivated to do some of the best work of their careers in that kind of environment.
Well, and when you work at a team like that, if there's a mistake made or if something is tried and it didn't work out, you still know that 9 times out of 10, everybody on the team is trying to support what that idea is. I'm forever grateful for a bunch of people getting together and me having had an idea. Like, I had an idea, this is a crazy idea, I thought we'd tell it as a story. When people are going to give of their time, and that's time away from friends and family they're giving to you, working long hours, of course I'm going to listen. Of course I want to hear what folks have to say, because they're going to make your thing better. They're way better at a million things that you're not good at, and trying to recognize that and then having support. And I got to give a shout out to all the great producers I've had as well. Tom and Lisa on Ultraman, they espouse the same sort of philosophy. Working with Peter Ramsey, working with the folks at, Josh and Emily at 21 Laps on Ollie, Teddy Biaselli. Those folks were people who said, yeah, let's give it a shot. Let's try this thing. And it's so funny, too, when you talk about Ollie. I think there are things that people thought that we got the heaviest notes on, which, like the harder things in the series, we rarely got a note on those things. They believed in that series and they supported those big swings. Doing an episode that is mostly, for the first 10 or 15 minutes of episode 3, there's not much talking. So that was a big swing that we took, and that was supported by Teddy and the folks surrounding us. So, of course, when you have people at the caliber that I get to work with, why wouldn't you trust them? Why wouldn't you lean on them to say, hey, I'm not quite sure what I want to do here. Throw your ideas out there and let's see what happens.
Yeah, that's great.
But I think that's definitely the best way of working with the team, because I think that empathy pays back to you. You get the sense that all of the crew understood that's where you were coming from. And you communicated it so effectively to them, Shannon, that, they were empowered to do like really special things. They were there pushing that extra 10% just to really nail what your vision was. But I think it was because they realized it was almost like a safe space. They always knew that you were going to be really grateful, and even if it was like, this is great but no, they knew that it was like a respectful no, and it was like a kind of, no, that's not where I want to go, but it's great, let's go in this direction instead. It works so well, and it's almost textbook of how to really communicate creatively with a team.
But let me ricochet that back to you as well, to you and to Steph and to Christine on Ollie and Sean on Ultraman and all of our supervisors. There is just a way. I'll tell you this. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. When I was a kid, I wanted to work at ILM. To be able to...
Me too, Shannon, me too.
And there you are. And to be able to do it now, and to have had the experience I've had where it's, again, the philosophies and the things that I hold dear have been shared by the teams that I've worked on, which is why I keep trying to figure. I tell Rob, I may have told you this before, but I've said it to Hayden a million times. I wake up many times thinking, man, I got to get this next thing going so I can work with the folks at ILM again. Yeah, and I bring it up when I go into a meeting. You know who'd be great at doing that thing that we have to do? I'm trying to be as neutral as I can without revealing things that I'm working out to work things. On. So, yeah, very secret things. But when you get a team together, when you get a great team together, you want to keep it together. There were lots of problems with the old studio system, lots of problems. But the things that they got right were you had groups of folks. Like when John Ford was doing a movie, he got to work with the same crew again and again. He got to make lots of movies because he was under contract to make lots of movies. So making lots of movies with the same people over and over again, you're going to get better at it, and you're going to get better at it together. And when you have, just take one person being really good at something or one person with a team where they're all together working on it and getting better at it, man, I told Hayden, I was like, imagine after having done Ollie, after having done Ultraman, imagine what we could do in the next one. Because we're all, I know, Hayden, you were doing it, Steph was doing it, Christine, Sean, everybody down the line. was like, oh man, what if we tried this next time? Or what do we learn from that mistake? So
Yeah.
I have a little journal of the things I got wrong. And I do it on a daily basis. I'll write a note down on my phone. Or how could I have communicated that more clearly? Maybe we try this the next time. Maybe we do this. Maybe I shouldn't have been so insistent on this. All those things to go back and say, how can we get better at it? Because everybody on this call knows how hard it is to make the things that we make. It's a privileged position to be in, but it doesn't mean it's not hard to do. And then you want to do it well.
It's really interesting because for many years, I used to have quite a heavy level of imposter syndrome. And you used to kind of sit there thinking, I'm making this up as I go along. But I think it was a kind of superpower in a strange way, because every project, you were believing you were making it up as you went along, but the next project you were going to do it better. And the next project you were going to do it better. And it meant that you were always constantly trying to focus on the things you could do better next time. And as it went on, then your imposter syndrome kind of like settles down and you go, actually, kind of, we've been through this enough times now where I think we do know what we're doing and we're just getting better and better at it. So yeah, I'm completely with you, Shannon. You just got to kind of iteratively get better each project.
Shannon, I have a question. I do follow you on Instagram, and your Jim Gordon series is just one of my favorite things ever. And I'm curious, do you use that to sort of practice those like looks and those situations of empathy? Because some of them are just heartbreaking.
So I started doing those drawings during COVID, and I did the first on some Ingram animation paper and some Blackwing pencils, and I just started drawing them. But it's the way I get like certain things that I'm feeling out. Some things are not connected to me. People have actually reached out when I post, are you okay, man? Are you all right? I want to keep my drawing chops up, so I'm always drawing and trying to do it. But it's been so incredible that Gordon, just something I do on my own, is the thing that gets brought up more than anything else when I meet people for the first time. That is because it's me, I think, in my purest form of just being honest with no notes and just putting down. And I usually got like 6 or 7 that I'm working on at once, and I'll move away from it because maybe it's too technically hard or I don't have the time for it. But it always means a lot when people bring it up. And speaking about empathy too, when people would bring their own experiences to things, we'll talk about animators, like bringing those experiences to things. I think it's one of the reasons anybody who knows me and sees Emmy and Ultraman sees my daughter. But people who don't know me at all say, that's my daughter, that's my niece, that's my nephew. They recognize themselves in it. And it's because as a collective team, not just my experiences, but the experiences of everybody involved in the film informed who that character became. And that's why I think there's been this connection with her in a way that I was hopeful for but wasn't expecting, that there'd be anybody who's seen the film has seen her. I see this a lot on Twitter. That's my baby, that's my child. Mm-hmm. It's funny how these things go out into the world, they become everybody else's. They're no longer just yours, they're shared with everybody. So, and there are great things about it and there are not so great things about it, but it's pretty incredible to watch.
That's pretty fun. From a kind of a day-to-day craft perspective, Shannon, when you're working on some of the quieter scenes that are carrying all this emotion, usually in the subtext, how, especially in animation when everything is so calculated and you got a team of people trying to execute those notes, how are you kind of striking that balance between being too on the nose with the animation notes and the performances to where everything is too visually demonstrated, not held back enough, but just enough to where everybody knows exactly what you're communicating? Your shows do that so particularly well, and I'm curious how you're working with the teams to kind of help that happen.
Well, it's reminding yourself of the initial thing that you pitched or being reminded of it. And I need to have people remind me sometimes. Remember, this is what you pitched, and this is what I responded to in your pitch. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're right. I forgot about that because of all the other noise that's happening. And then I think just repeating it. What are the goals of this film? What does this character want? What does the character want in this moment? Those are the questions that I do. And my writing process is, I get up really early, get up at 5 or 5:30 in the morning, make coffee, and I get right into it. I don't dilly-dally. I get right into it. Then I'll go walk. I'll go on a big walk, and I'm writing while I'm walking. And I'm really seeing it in my head. I'll put a piece of music on that is appropriate for the thing I'm working on. With Ollie, it was Redheaded Stranger by Willie Nelson, that album, which is an amazing album. And also Daniel Hart's score for A Ghost Story, which is a very powerfully moving film. And it's just getting my head in the right space and seeing it. What time of day is it? What's the weather like? And how does that affect the character? Are there things that can frustrate the character in a moment? There's that moment where Coach Shimura is walking out of the locker room in Ultraman, and he bumps his shoulder on the door, and that was inspired by a story I'd heard about a legendary filmmaker being frustrated in a meeting, and how little things that happened during the meeting made this person more frustrated. Or the idea of Ken's dad, when he's getting into the car, he's dropping his keys, make him more embarrassed. He's already embarrassed. He feels shame because he's had his own mistakes called out to him, but he's also been misjudged. And we've all been through that, right? You know, when you're having a rough day, but let's make that feel worse for the character in that moment. Well, he drops his keys, which I think was the idea of the animator in that scene. It's layering it, going back in and revising it. And that's what filmmaking allows, especially with animation, because you're working on it for so long, is, you know, you get out those basic beats, the basic character beats, then you get more specific about it. I'm doing it right now on a project that I'm doing. And I did a whole outline for the whole season. And the primary focus of that outline was sharing the relationship with these two characters and how it begins, how it evolves and changes, and how it resolves. That was the primary focus. But then once I've written that, then I got to go back through it and say, well, here are how these other characters are involved as well, because it's a bit of an ensemble piece. So let's go back through it and do that. Then when I go in to write the script, then I'm like, okay, now I'm getting down the details of those little things. What are little habits those characters have that don't really mean anything for the scene? You know, Guillermo is a huge proponent of this. Let's find those things in animation that we do every day in our lives, that you see actors that you get just naturally in live action. It's why I want to use more real time in my work, because you can be more spontaneous if you're shooting real time, or if you're using real time things can present themselves to you, which is just harder because every frame is cared for in animation. So how do you keep it spontaneous? So I think it's two things. It's you challenging yourself every day to do it, but also making sure that you have people in the team who are going to constantly challenge you and say, no, that's not good enough. This needs to be better. Or I don't believe her in this moment, or I don't believe him in this moment, or I'm not connecting with them in this moment. Okay, let's examine it and figure out why. It's getting back in there and trying to get it right and thinking about it again and again. I always feel like there's something I'm chasing in every project, and you chase it and chase it and chase it. And Rob, you were asking earlier about like, how do you stop getting bored with it? When I get bored with it is when I'm done with it. When I'm done with it, I can't look at it for a while. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to talk about it. That's when I try and distance myself, because it takes so much out of you to do it. So you want to move on to something that's fresh and new. It doesn't feel like a demolition derby that you just went through.
Yeah, exactly. The iterative process, it gets you very close to every single detail. Do you find yourself, Shannon, especially with most of your work, writing and directing, or writing and show writing, where you had an emotional beat in mind, and you know what the heart of the thing that you were just referring to, that you're going for, and you'd written it, and then you find in animation that the animators brought something to the performance that makes you realize, oh, wait, I can do that without that line now. It's all playing on the character's face. And when you see it, or is that pretty common for you?
That happens all the time, because you tend to overwrite in a script, especially dialogue. Dialogue is, there's a great podcast that Chris McQuarrie was on, and you know what an incredible writer and director Mr. McQuarrie is. But he was talking about, I think, a sequence in one of the Mission Impossible films where it had a ton of dialogue, and he ended up taking, I think, all of it out because he realized he didn't need it. And sometimes you have to prove that to yourself by seeing it. There have been times when I wrote it and thought this is absolutely essential, and then I saw it in board. It was like, no, we don't need that. Or it is in animation. It's a little harder in animation because it's a lot more expensive. But if you can catch it at least in rough layout, or at least in a blocking pass in animation, and say, oh, we want to take, and those are the harder ones to make, because somebody put a lot of work into it. And, by you saying, we're not going to do this anymore, we had, plenty of those moments on things we've worked on Hayden, where it's just like, we're going down this road. If it felt good at the time, but once we're seeing it in the context of the whole movie, we don't need it, or it's redundant, or it's revealing something too soon. But you have to be okay with it. And also saying, look, we might not use you here, but we're going to use you here and here and here. That's one of the things I'm constantly, because I've been in that position on a crew as a character designer and storyboard artist, doing dozens of designs and not getting it until the final one, or it was, a collection of all the work that the whole department had done. I've been there and I know what it feels like. And people can say all they want that it's just business. It's not business. It is very personal. The things that we do are very personal. And I require folks that work with me to lay it out. And to be honest, somebody was telling me on the crew at ILM, they said, on Ollie, Shannon, you would tell this story. And we're like, oh, well, here's another story. Where are we going now? And by the end of it, you're like, oh, that was an animation launch.
Right.
Because there was an emotional, I usually want to connect through a personal experience I've had and encourage other people. You don't have to tell me the story, but, be vulnerable in that way. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do because even if other people don't know what's behind that emotion, you put it up there. But I see it with animators all the time, and those are some of my favorite surprises. But not just animators, but everybody along the line is, oh, I tried to do this, or I wanted to give this a shot, and this is based on a personal experience. And those are the things that are most precious to me, and they're the things that I remember. And like a little look, those little quirks, Ken bouncing his knee up and down. A lot of people talk about that. That's something I do when I'm nervous, but then making his dad do it as well. So they both have that same quirk, even though at the beginning of the film, they feel like they have nothing in common. Finding those little things are the thing that allows you to watch it again and again. And again, it's like my favorite filmmakers. If you look at Jaws, when Brody gets that first phone call that there's the body on the beach, his kids are playing in the background and they're kind of doing their whole thing and asking questions. It's what real life is like. And then they've already moved outside and are on the swing set. And as he's getting in the truck and leaving, that's why that movie is so good. The shark, those sequences are amazing, but they're only amazing because I care about Brody.
That's right.
And want him to make it back to his family. And, you take two superpowers, David Lean and Dickens, and you see that version of Great Expectations, that version of Oliver Twist. And you can see what was written by Dickens on the page, but also their very specific personal experiences that I don't know about, but I can feel them when I watch it. Or something like Moonlight. You talk about a movie that's got a lot of depth that expresses an experience that I haven't experienced, but man, do I empathize, and man, do I want to understand that, and do I want to be a better person and help somebody who might be in a situation like that. Those are the kinds of, and it's all of the specific details of those things that feel like real vulnerable things that probably are.
That's amazing. I mean, it's no question why movies have the authenticity that they do and the emotional authenticity that they do. Even though they're made by hundreds of people, they're on the same wavelength because of the way you're directing that and guiding that team. It's really great.
I can't do it on my own. It really is. Like, I can give you an idea, but I can't make you do it. What you bring to it and those great surprises I get every day where it veers in a completely different direction than what I had anticipated, or, hey, what if we tried that? That really is, the surprise of making movies, and you get a million surprises every day. They're not all great, but you remember the great ones because it's that, those moments where you got that nice surprise of, oh, I hadn't seen it that way. Oh, one of my favorites is on Ultraman when we have the big battle at the end, and it's Ken and his dad, and I had spontaneously come up with the like, we were in a meeting, and it was John, and I was like, John, get over here, and I acted the whole thing out how I wanted to do it. Then we shot it, we were animating it, and Kim in Singapore came up with that drifting shot. He's, look, this wasn't the original shot. This wasn't how it was. We gave you that shot, but I wanted to try something. And it's one of my favorite things in the movie. I had nothing at all to do with it. It was just Kim going, what if we did this? And man, does it get a reaction. I've seen people cheer in audiences because Kim had that great idea. And Kim's an animation suit, not a camera suit, not a director, but that idea, that is just a great storytelling idea. And he knew if he shifted that camera around a little bit more to reveal that it would be even more powerful. And it's in tight and close with giant characters, but it still feels intimate. It's such a brilliant idea. So big ol' hats off to Kim for that amazing idea.
I remember that coming through with dailies, and you just thought, oh my God, this is so much better than I ever imagined it could be. And yeah, it was one of those magical moments. There's quite a few magical moments, but like that was a truly special one. Yeah.
Well, that is a wonderful note to end on, and it's been so much fun to have you both on the show to get to talk a little bit about Ultraman and your creative process, and especially empathy in animation. We want to end with something fun, the Martini, the last shot of the day. Any items, a recommendation, something to pass along to our audience? Maybe Shannon, we'll start with you.
I am reading a book series now called Hollow Kingdom. And the first book is Hollow Kingdom, the second book is Feral Creatures. And I'm not doing it any service by distilling it down to this, but it's a zombie apocalypse is told from the perspective of a domesticated crow. And it's funny, and it's heartbreaking, and it's hopeful, and it's all the emotions of life. And read that series of books. Kira Jane Buxton is the author of the Hollow Kingdom series. And I can't recommend it highly enough. It was given to me by a friend, and the moment I read it, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is my kind of book. So check out Hollow Kingdom.
Zombie apocalypse from the perspective of a domesticated crow. That is unique.
I know it.
Awesome.
It's one of those
amazing.
ideas, like it sounds, you think you might know what it is when you hear that pitch, and then you start reading it. And I actually recommended it to Hayden. I was like, hey, you got to read this book, dude.
Excellent. Well, we'll link to that in the show notes. Hayden.
I've already covered Human Target, which can't recommend enough, but after finishing Ultraman, I've got to say my Ultraman Bible was this book called Animate Architecture. Unbelievable. It's by Steph, and it just covers all of the amazing artwork from Akira all the way through to Tekken Concrete. It was by my side all the way through Ultraman, just as a kind of like a go-to reference for, different animation styles, Japanese culture, how we could make things look. So it's just one of the best reference books for that style of art. It's amazing.
Jenny.
Yeah, so my Martini this week is a video game that I've been playing. I am a Nintendo girl through and through. And this is Luigi's Mansion 2. I actually played Luigi's Mansion 3 first. It was specifically made for the Switch. It's one of my favorite video games ever. This one is actually enhanced. This was originally released on the Nintendo 3DS, I think 2013, and it's been enhanced and updated. The controls are updated, the visuals are much better, and it is so much fun. It's just a really kind of low stakes, easy game where it's a little stressful at times when you're fighting multiple ghosts at once, but it's just a delight to play. So if you like kind of Halloween creepy things like I do, I would definitely give this a play, and also Luigi's Mansion 3.
I just pulled out my consoles today because I pulled out my Steam Deck and I pulled out my Switch. So I'm going to have to check out Luigi's Mansion.
My pleasure lately has been the third season of Welcome to Wrexham. I don't know if everybody's been watching that show.
Oh, yes.
It is so much fun. So Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney bought a football team in the UK, which is a soccer team to us silly Americans. It's on FX. You can stream it on Hulu or I think Disney Plus if you're connected in some way. Oh, it's on Disney Plus in the UK. I think you get it most places in the world. Lovely story of a football team down on their luck for many years. And it's a very well done documentary. My wife's not a particular football fan, but loves the show. And she's the one to say, I think we still have an episode or two left to watch this one. So you don't have to be a sports fan to enjoy the show because it's really about the behind the scenes and the care for the town and the drama and everything that goes on. It's very delightful. So
we are a Wrexham family over here as well, and we're not, and for American listeners it's soccer, so but football, but man is it a great show. And I'm not a soccer fan, But yeah, I love that show.
It's so delightful.
Yeah. Oh, Snoop Dogg on the Olympics. That's my bonus. That's my bonus one.
Oh my
Snoop
gosh. Oh,
yeah.
Snoop Dogg
That's-
on the
that's
Olympics.
perfect.
Wait, let me raise you Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart together on the Olympics.
Oh yeah.
Because that's next level.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible. I love that I was watching this thing called Very High Tea Time with Snoop Dogg, and he was in the UK and he was having tea, and the host used the word etiquette, and he just he goes, yeah, me and my friend Martha Stewart, we talk about etiquette a little bit. I'm like, that's a name to drop right there. Yeah.
I love it.
That's amazing.
They are so funny together.
I love it.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Lighter Darker podcast. If you have a question from the show or you would like to suggest a topic, email us at lighterdarker@ilm.com. And you can find, I don't know, Shannon, if you'd like people to find you on social media.
You can just type my name in. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. A mix of drawings and union ravings and political ravings every now and then, although I try to keep it mostly about art and film. But yeah, you can find me on those things. Just look up my name.
Look for Shannon Tindle. And Hayden.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. So both Twitter and Instagram, you can find me. I think I'm at Haydzilla, which is the easiest one. It was the shortest one I could find, so...
I'm at rbrado on most social media, or you can find me at robbrado.com. Show notes and transcript for this episode and all episodes are going to be found at ilm.com/lighterdarker. That's all one word. We thank Industrial Light and Magic for hosting the Lighter Darker podcast. The show is produced by myself and Jenny Ely. Today's episode has been edited by Chris Hawkinson, and we want to thank the entire PR team led by Greg Gresby, who worked behind the scenes to make all this happen. Thank you so much for listening to the Lighter Darker podcast, and until next time, may your pixels be both lighter and darker.